"I'll make it productive," he interrupted. "Today. That's why I borrowed the deep tiller." She sighed. "Just don't wait too long to consider alternatives. Our offer won't stay on the table indefinitely." After Alicia left, Jacob stood motionless. Beside his tractor, the corporate offer crumpled in his fist. Rusty pressed against his leg, offering silent comfort in the way only a loyal farm dog can. That evening, after reviewing the farm's finances and finding no viable path to solvency, Jacob climbed to the attic. Dust motes danced in the beam of his flashlight as he made his way to an old military footlocker tucked beneath the eaves. The locker had belonged to his grandfather, William Mercer, who had claimed this land after returning from service in World War II. Family legend held that William had used surveying skills unusual for farmers of that era to select this particular property, passing up seemingly better land elsewhere in the county. Jacob hadn't examined these materials since inheriting the farm, viewing them more as family heirlooms than practical resources. The earliest journal, dated 1947, detailed William's methodical search for the perfect parcel. May 12th, 1947. "I am convinced a significant anomaly exists in the eastern section of this available parcel. The old native stories speak of a sacred place in this valley that was hidden during the Great Conflict. White settlers dismiss such tales, but my experience with indigenous scouts during the Pacific Campaign has taught me to respect such knowledge." Jacob flipped forward, his interest growing. June 23rd, 1947. "Acquired the full 180 acres today. Agent thought me peculiar for selecting this particular section, as the eastern portion appears unsuited for cultivation. If he knew my true interest lay not in the surface, but in what might lie beneath, he would think me madder still." His grandfather had apparently selected the property specifically because of something beneath the eastern hillside. He continued reading. July 3rd, 1947. "Initial survey confirms my suspicions. The soil density follows too precise a pattern to be natural. My measurements indicate a rectangular space approximately 15 ft below surface level. The indigenous legends may have basis, in fact." July 12th, 1947. "Professor Whitfield visited today, expressing unusual interest in purchasing the eastern section, offered twice the going rate per acre. When I declined, his manner turned cold, mentioned that his archaeological society had prior claim to any historical findings in the county, and that I would be wise to accept his generosity." Jacob sat back, his mind racing. A rectangular space beneath the eastern hillside. His grandfather had apparently detected some kind of underground structure, but had kept the discovery private, and an academic had shown interest in the property even then. Could this explain Dr. Grayson's persistent interest, a continuation of his predecessor's attention from more than 70 years ago? The possibility gave Jacob renewed purpose. If he could find evidence of whatever William had detected, he might secure financial assistance through historical preservation programs or negotiate with heritage from a position of strength rather than desperation. The next morning, Jacob prepared to till the eastern hillside. He studied his grandfather's journals one more time, noting areas where William had mapped the strongest anomalies, then marked those sections on a current survey map. As the sun climbed higher, Jacob started the tractor and headed toward the troublesome slope. The deep tilling attachment would allow him to penetrate much deeper than conventional plowing had ever managed. He didn't notice the drone that briefly hovered over his property, its camera zooming in on his activities, or the urgent phone call being made to Heritage Agricultural Development's executive offices. For 2 grueling days, Jacob worked from dawn until dusk, the powerful deep tiller slowly transforming the eastern hillside's surface. The work was punishing even with mechanized help. The unusual density of the clay required constant adjustment and manual intervention. Each evening, he would collapse into his grandfather's old armchair, muscles aching and hands blistered despite his work gloves, and read more from William's journals for guidance. On the 3rd day, as Jacob guided the tractor across a particularly stubborn section that William had marked with special attention in his survey notes, something changed. The deep tiller, which had been meeting consistent resistance, suddenly dropped several inches, as if the ground beneath had given way. "What the hell?" Jacob muttered, immediately shutting down the engine. The vibration through the tractor had been different from hitting an ordinary rock or root system. It had felt hollow, almost like breaking through a thin shell. Jacob climbed down and examined the area where the tiller had broken through. A depression about 3 feet wide had formed, with loose soil falling into what appeared to be an open space below. Kneeling beside the hole, he cleared away some of the dirt, revealing what looked like worked stone beneath, not natural rock formations, but deliberately placed and fitted blocks. His pulse quickened as he remembered his grandfather's journal entries about a rectangular space beneath the hillside. After retrieving a shovel from the truck, Jacob carefully widened the opening, taking care not to damage whatever structure lay below. After 30 minutes of cautious digging, he had created an opening large enough to shine his flashlight into. The beam revealed a chamber below, its walls lined with carefully fitted stone blocks. It was clearly man-made, not a natural cave formation. The floor lay about 8 feet below the opening he'd created, with what appeared to be stone steps leading down from another entrance, now blocked by collapsed earth. Jacob's practical nature battled with his growing excitement. He knew he should probably contact authorities or experts before proceeding, but the fear of Heritage and Dr. Grayson swooping in to claim whatever he'd found pushed him to investigate further. This was his property, his family's legacy. He had the right to know what lay beneath his own land. After retrieving rope and a more powerful flashlight from the barn, Jacob secured the rope to his tractor and carefully lowered himself into the chamber. As his boots touched the stone floor, he stood motionless for a moment, allowing his flashlight to sweep across what had remained hidden for what must have been centuries. The chamber was larger than he had initially estimated, roughly 20 feet square with a ceiling about 10 feet high. The walls were constructed of precisely fitted stone blocks, with no mortar visible between them, yet fitting so tightly that not even a blade of grass could be inserted in the joints. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, displaying a level of precision that seemed impossible for ancient tools to achieve. But it was the chamber's contents that left Jacob breathless. At the center stood a stone altar or table, its surface covered, with symbols etched into the stone. Around the perimeter of the room, recessed alcoves contained ceramic vessels, metal objects, and what appeared to be artifacts of ceremonial significance. Most remarkably, the walls were covered with paintings and symbols, a complex pictographic system that clearly told a story Jacob couldn't yet decipher. As he photographed the central altar with his phone, Jacob noticed that his compass app was behaving erratically, the needle spinning continuously, as if unable to establish true north. Other unexplainable phenomena became apparent as he continued. His documentation, his phone's battery, which had been at 90% when he descended, was now rapidly depleting despite minimal use, and he experienced an odd sensation of pressure in his ears that changed as he moved around the chamber. After nearly an hour of careful documentation, Jacob decided to retrieve a single small artifact as tangible proof of his discovery, a palm-sized carved stone disc featuring intricate symbols around its perimeter. He justified this minimal disturbance as necessary given the circumstances, carefully wrapping the disc in his handkerchief and securing it in his pocket. Just as he prepared to ascend, Jacob's headlamp illuminated something he had initially overlooked: a narrow passage leading from the main chamber deeper into the earth. The passage was partially obscured by shadow, but appeared to extend significantly beyond the limits of his light. The temptation to explore further was powerful, but Jacob's practical nature asserted itself. He had already spent over an hour underground. His phone battery was nearly depleted, and no one knew his exact location. Further exploration could wait until he had processed his initial discovery and determined the best path forward. As Jacob emerged from the chamber into the fading evening light, he found Rusty still waiting anxiously, along with an unexpected visitor, Dr. Sofia Vasquez, a young archaeologist from the State University whose public lectures on regional indigenous cultures Jacob had occasionally attended, stood beside his tractor, examining the scattered stones from the collapsed entrance. "Mr. Mercer," she greeted him with evident surprise as he climbed out of the hole. "I was driving by and saw your dog apparently in distress. I stopped to make sure everything was all right." Her eyes moved from Jacob to the opening and back. "May I ask what you've discovered?" Jacob hesitated, uncertain whether to trust. An academic with his find, given his grandfather's experiences with Professor Whitfield. But Dr. Vasquez had a reputation for advocating indigenous rights to cultural artifacts, and had publicly criticized institutions that hoarded significant discoveries, including the Archaeological Society now headed by Dr. Grayson. "Something that shouldn't be here," he answered finally. "Something that challenges everything we thought we knew about this region's history." Dr. Vasquez's expression shifted from polite concern to intense professional interest. "May I see?" "Not today," Jacob replied, making a quick decision. "It's getting dark and the entrance isn't properly secured, but I could use someone with expertise to help document this properly." He paused, studying her reaction. "Someone who won't immediately report this to Heritage or the Archaeological Society." Dr. Vasquez considered this for a moment, then nodded. "I understand institutional politics better than most, Mr. Mercer. I can respect your caution." She handed him her card. "If you decide you want independent archaeological expertise, call me directly on my cell. No university involvement unless you explicitly request it." After she departed, Jacob carefully covered the entrance with a tarp, weighted down by rocks, making it appear like ordinary farm equipment storage to casual observation. Only then did he allow himself to truly process what he had discovered, an archaeological site of potentially unprecedented significance that could completely rewrite the region's historical narrative. That evening, as he examined the stone disc under better lighting at his kitchen table, the true implications began to sink in. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, featuring symbols arranged in patterns suggesting mathematical relationships. The stone itself was unlike any local material, with a density and color that hinted at distant origins. Jacob's phone buzzed with a text from Alicia Donovan. "Dr. Grayson noticed you're finally working the eastern section. He's very interested in visiting tomorrow to discuss." The timing couldn't be coincidental. Someone, probably the drone he had noticed earlier, had reported his discovery to Heritage, and now they were moving quickly to gain access. But what had been a simple corporate land grab had suddenly transformed into something far more complex. Jacob wasn't just fighting to save his farm anymore. He had become the custodian of a discovery that could reshape understanding of the entire region's past. As he contemplated his next steps, Jacob recalled a passage from his grandfather's final journal entry regarding the eastern hillside. December 12, 1972. "I have kept the secret of what lies beneath the clay for nearly 25 years, not from greed, but from deep conviction that some discoveries belong not to individuals or institutions, but to humanity itself. When the proper time comes, when the right guardian appears with both the wisdom to understand and the strength to protect, the hidden chamber will reveal its purpose. Until then, I leave this knowledge to my descendants, trusting they will recognize the moment when preservation and revelation must finally align." Jacob realized that moment had arrived, forced by circumstance and a desperate attempt to save his family legacy. The discovery beneath his land offered both tremendous opportunity and tremendous responsibility. The chance to preserve his farm while potentially transforming historical understanding, but also the burden of ensuring the discovery wasn't exploited or suppressed by powerful interests. After careful consideration, Jacob picked up his phone and dialed Dr. Vasquez's number. Whatever lay ahead, he needed an ally with both expertise and integrity. Someone who could help him navigate the complex intersection of archaeology, property rights, and corporate interests that his tractor blade had accidentally uncovered. "The ancestors have chosen you," his grandfather had written in his final entry. "Trust their wisdom." Jacob stared at the stone disk, its symbols catching the kitchen light in ways that seemed almost alive. "I hope you know what you're doing, Grandpa," he whispered, "because everything's about to change. If you found this story captivating so far, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary discoveries that challenge our understanding of history. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and hit that notification bell because tomorrow's video will reveal even more astonishing findings from beneath Oakridge Valley Farm. Dr. Sofia Vasquez arrived at Oakridge Valley Farm shortly after dawn the following morning, her modest sedan packed with archaeological equipment and documentation tools. Jacob was struck by how different she was from the academic stereotype he had expected. Sophia was practical and direct, dressed for fieldwork in worn hiking boots and durable canvas pants. Her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She carried herself with the confident efficiency of someone accustomed to working in challenging conditions rather than the cautious formality of a traditional academic. "I brought ground-penetrating radar," she explained as they unloaded equipment from her car, "and a portable spectrometer for preliminary material analysis. We should be able to get a much clearer picture of what we're dealing with before anyone else gets involved." "I appreciate your discretion," Jacob said, helping her with a particularly heavy case, especially given how quickly Heritage is moving to gain access. Sophia nodded, her expression serious. Archaeological ethics aren't just abstract principles. For me, Mr. Mercer, indigenous cultural heritage has been systematically appropriated for centuries. Significant discoveries are often whisked away to distant institutions, or worse, private collections. I've dedicated my career to changing that pattern. Just Jacob, please, he replied, finding himself immediately trusting her straightforward manner. And I think our interests align perfectly. I want to protect both my farm and whatever historical significance this discovery holds. They made their way to the covered entrance, Rusty following at a comfortable distance, his initial distress seemingly diminished by Sophia's presence. Jacob removed the tarp, revealing the opening he had, partially shored up the previous evening with lumber from his barn. Sophia approached the edge and knelt to examine the stonework visible around the entrance. "This construction technique," she murmured, brushing away soil to reveal more of the fitted blocks. "It's reminiscent of pre-Columbian masonry, but the precision is extraordinary and completely undocumented in this region." Before descending, they set up the ground-penetrating radar at several points around the entrance, creating a preliminary map of what lay beneath. The results displayed on Sophia's tablet caused her to inhale sharply. "Jacob, this isn't just a single chamber," she said, angling the screen so he could see. "There's an entire complex down there. Multiple connected chambers, extending at least 200 yards in that direction." She pointed toward the eastern boundary of his property. "This is far more extensive than anything previously discovered in this part of the continent." With proper safety equipment, helmets with mounted lights, harnesses, and a more secure rope system, they made their way into the main chamber Jacob had explored the previous day. Sophia moved with reverent care, documenting everything systematically before touching or approaching any artifacts. "These ceramics," she said, examining one of the vessels with her light. "The craftsmanship suggests a sophisticated firing technique, not believed to exist in pre-colonial North America. And these symbols, they appear to be a form of proto-writing, possibly a complete logographic system, rather than simple pictographs." She moved to the central altar, her expression growing increasingly astonished as she examined the tablets. "This is impossible," she whispered, her professional detachment momentarily cracking. "These show astronomical calculations of remarkable precision. Look at this tablet. It appears to track celestial movements across extremely long time periods, including what might be eclipse predictions." Jacob watched as Sophia worked, her expertise revealing layers of significance he had completely missed in his initial exploration. What had appeared to him as simply old artifacts were, through her trained eyes, revealing evidence of mathematical understanding, astronomical knowledge, and cultural practices entirely unknown to archaeological record. "How old do you think this is?" he asked, as she carefully photographed a series of metallic objects arranged in what appeared to be a deliberate pattern. "Without carbon dating or other laboratory analysis, I can't be certain," she replied. "But based on construction techniques and material oxidation, we're looking at a minimum of 800 to 1,000 years, possibly much older." She glanced up at him. "Jacob, I need to be absolutely clear about something. This discovery could fundamentally change our understanding of pre-Columbian civilization in North America. The level of sophistication evident here simply doesn't match the established archaeological record for this region." The implications began to sink in. Jacob had discovered not just some interesting historical site, but potentially evidence that would require rewriting textbooks and reconsidering fundamental assumptions about indigenous technological development. Sophia carefully lifted one of the tablets, examining its edges. "There's something else extraordinary here. Some of these materials aren't local to this continent. This tablet appears to be made from jade with specific trace elements typically found only in parts of Central America. And these metal alloys," she indicated several small objects on the altar, "contain combinations that suggest sophisticated metallurgical knowledge and possibly trade networks far more extensive than previously documented." After several hours of meticulous documentation, they turned their attention to the passageway Jacob had noticed during his first exploration. With proper lighting, they could see that it extended significantly beyond the main chamber, sloping gently downward. "Should we explore further?" Jacob asked, checking the time. He was acutely aware that Dr. Grayson had requested to visit the property today, and Heritage would likely become increasingly aggressive in their attempts to gain access. Sophia considered carefully. "We should at least determine where it leads, and whether there are additional chambers. That information could be crucial for establishing the full scope of protection needed." They proceeded cautiously down the passage, which maintained the same precise stonework as the main chamber. After approximately 50 yards, it opened into a second, smaller chamber that caused even Sophia to stop in amazement. Unlike the first chamber with its artifacts and tablets, this room appeared to be dedicated entirely to astronomical observation. A complex arrangement of channels cut into the floor, aligned with small apertures in the ceiling. Apertures that Jacob realized must extend all the way to the surface, cleverly disguised within the rocky landscape that had frustrated farmers for generations. "It's an observatory," Sophia breathed, moving carefully around the perimeter. These channels would have been filled with water to create reflecting surfaces. The apertures would allow observation of specific celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, perhaps even particular star alignments. The mathematics required to design this. She shook her head in wonder. "Jacob, this is unprecedented. An underground observatory of this sophistication fundamentally challenges our understanding of indigenous astronomical knowledge." As they continued exploring, Sophia's scientific excitement was tempered by growing concern. "We need to secure legal protection for this site immediately," she said, as they made their way back toward the main chamber. "The archaeological community has protocols for discoveries of this magnitude, but those protocols assume institutional oversight. With private property and corporate interests involved, we're in complicated territory." Jacob nodded, sharing her concern. "And based on my grandfather's journals, there's a decades-long history of attempts to acquire this property, specifically because someone suspected what lay beneath. That makes me question whether normal protection channels would work, or whether they'd be manipulated." Back on the surface, they found Rusty barking alertly at an approaching vehicle, the now familiar black SUV belonging to Alicia Donovan. Jacob checked his watch. It was barely noon, hours before the appointment she had requested for Dr. Grayson's visit. "They're moving faster than expected," Sophia murmured, quickly packing her most revealing equipment into her car. "How do you want to handle this?" Jacob made a split-second decision. "Follow my lead." We'll acknowledge finding something, but minimize its significance for now. We need time to establish proper protection before they understand the full scope. Alicia wasn't alone. Dr. Marcus Grayson sat in the passenger seat, his tall, thin frame and silver hair visible through the windshield. Even from a distance, Jacob could see the man's intense focus on the tarp-covered entrance to the chamber. "Mr. Mercer," Alicia called as she stepped from the vehicle. "I apologize for arriving early, but Dr. Grayson's schedule opened up unexpectedly." Her eyes moved to Sophia, registering immediate recognition and barely concealed dismay. "Dr. Vasquez, what a surprise to find you here." "Just helping a friend with some unusual findings," Sophia replied casually, though Jacob noted the immediate tension between the two women. Dr. Grayson approached, extending his hand to Jacob while barely acknowledging Sophia's presence. "Mr. Mercer, I've been interested in your property's geological and historical features for quite some time. I understand you've made some sort of discovery during your land-clearing efforts." His calculated understatement was transparent to Jacob, who had now read enough of his grandfather's journals to understand the likely connection between Grayson and the Professor Whitfield, who had pressured William decades earlier. "Just hit something unexpected with the tractor," Jacob confirmed, matching Grayson's casual tone. "Appears to be some kind of old root cellar or storage space. Dr. Vasquez happened to be passing by and offered to take a look, given her expertise in historical structures." Grayson's eyes narrowed slightly at this deliberate downplaying. "A root cellar? How fascinating. Mind if I have a look?" "Actually, we've barely begun assessing structural stability," Sophia interjected smoothly. "As a matter of professional safety protocols, I wouldn't recommend anyone else entering until proper shoring is installed. Old structures like this can be quite hazardous." Alicia stepped forward, her business demeanor firmly in place. "Jacob, Heritage is prepared to offer substantial financial support for proper archaeological assessment, along with a significant revision to our purchase offer given this new development. Dr. Grayson's expertise would be invaluable in determining the historical significance and monetary value of whatever you've discovered." The carefully choreographed pressure was exactly what Jacob had expected. What he hadn't anticipated was the cold certainty in Grayson's eyes, the look of someone who knew precisely what lay beneath the tarp and had been waiting decades to access it. "I appreciate the offer," Jacob replied carefully, "but I'll need some time to consider my options. This is still active farmland, and I have ongoing operations to manage. Perhaps we could reschedule once I've had a chance to secure the site." Improperly, Grayson's professional smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, though I should mention that discoveries of potential historical significance on private property fall under specific regulatory frameworks. As president of the State Archaeological Society, I have certain statutory obligations to ensure proper assessment and preservation." The veiled threat was clear. If Jacob didn't cooperate voluntarily, Grayson was prepared to involve regulatory authorities. What remained unclear was whether those authorities would protect the discovery or simply provide Grayson with the access he sought. After Victoria and Grayson reluctantly departed with promises to follow up soon, Jacob and Sophia quickly covered the entrance with additional camouflage, making it appear like nothing more than a section of rocky ground with some farming equipment stored nearby. "Grayson knows," Sophia said quietly once the SUV was out of sight. "He knows exactly what's down there, or at least has a very good idea. The question is how," Jacob thought about his grandfather's journals. "I think there's been institutional knowledge about this site for generations, passed down through whatever academic society Professor Whitfield represented in the 1940s. Grayson isn't just discovering this now. He's been waiting for an opportunity to access it, which means we need to move quickly. I have contacts at the Indigenous Cultural Heritage Protection Alliance who could help establish legal protection independent of the State Archaeological Society," Sophia concluded. "With your permission, I'd like to bring in a trusted colleague who specializes in cultural property law." Jacob agreed, recognizing that the situation had escalated beyond what either of them could handle alone. As Sophia made calls from her car, he returned to the farmhouse to retrieve more of William's journals, hoping to find additional information about the mysterious society that had pressured his grandfather. What he found in the later journals was more disturbing than he had anticipated. Detailed accounts of systematic efforts to acquire the property through increasingly aggressive means, from financial pressure to threats of eminent domain proceedings, all orchestrated by an organization William referred to as the Antiquarian Circle. November 18, 1952, one entry read, "Whitfield's successor visited today, a man named Caldwell, with the same cold eyes and false courtesy, offered triple market value for the eastern section alone. When refused, suggested certain tax reassessments might be forthcoming, as he had colleagues in the county assessor's office. The circle grows bolder in their methods, while remaining invisible to public scrutiny." By the time Sophia returned from making her calls, Jacob had pieced together a troubling historical pattern. A shadowy academic organization with powerful connections had pursued knowledge of the underground complex for generations, operating through various front entities and affiliated individuals. Based on William's descriptions, the modern heritage agricultural development bore striking similarities to companies that had attempted to acquire the property in the 1950s and 1970s. "My colleague can be here tomorrow morning," Sophia announced. "She believes we can file for emergency protection under both archaeological preservation statutes and indigenous cultural heritage laws, but we'll need to move quickly and gather as much documentation as possible before Grayson can mobilize institutional opposition." As the sun began to set over Oakridge Valley Farm, Jacob felt the weight of unexpected responsibility settling on his shoulders. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save his family's land had evolved into a mission to protect a discovery that could reshape understanding of an entire civilization, and to prevent that discovery from being controlled by the same shadowy interests that had pursued it for over 70 years. He looked at Sophia, who was reviewing the day's documentation with intense concentration, and felt profound gratitude for the ally circumstance had provided. Whatever lay ahead, he wasn't facing it alone. "My grandfather kept this secret for decades," he said quietly. Protecting it was his life's work, though he never fully understood what he was protecting. "Now we know why." Sophia looked up from her tablet, her expression serious but determined. "And now we have a chance to ensure it's properly preserved and studied, not hidden away in some private collection or institutional vault. This discovery belongs to humanity, especially to the indigenous cultures whose ancestors created it." As night fell over the farm, they continued planning their next steps, knowing that powerful forces were already mobilizing against them. The race to protect one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in North American history had begun. a race against both corporate interests and an organization that had patiently waited generations for this moment. The stone disc Jacob had retrieved seemed to grow warmer on the kitchen table as darkness settled over the farm. Neither of them noticed how the symbols caught the light in ways that defied simple reflection, or how compass needles in nearby equipment subtly shifted direction when placed near the ancient artifact. The earth had kept its secrets for centuries, but now that they had been revealed, nothing would ever be the same. By dawn, Jacob and Sophia had transformed the farmhouse kitchen into an impromptu command center. Maps of the property were spread across the table. William's journals were stacked chronologically for reference, and Sophia's laptop displayed a growing database of their photographic documentation from the chambers below. Archaeological protection. Laws are complicated when it comes to private property, explained Amara Patel, the cultural heritage attorney Sophia had called in. She was a compact, energetic woman in her mid-40s, with an impressive record of protecting indigenous sites from development. But we have several strong angles to pursue. The combination of your grandfather's documentation and our preliminary scientific assessment gives us a solid foundation. Jacob poured more coffee for the three of them, the lack of sleep evident in their faces, but countered by the urgency of their mission. What's our first step? Filing for emergency protection under the Cultural Heritage Preservation Act, Amara replied, tapping documentation on her tablet. The site's apparent age and significance qualify it for immediate interim protection while a full assessment is conducted. That would legally prevent any disturbance, including by Heritage or the State Archaeological Society, pending a comprehensive review. Grayson will fight that, Sophia pointed out. He'll claim jurisdiction through the Archaeological Society and argue that they're the appropriate body to oversee assessment. Amara nodded grimly. Which is why we're simultaneously filing with the Tribal Cultural Resources Division and the Federal Archaeological Preservation Office. Creating multiple overlapping jurisdictional claims will force a careful, transparent process rather than allowing any single entity to control access. As they refined their strategy, Jacob's phone buzzed with a text message from Alicia Donovan. Urgent meeting requested. Dr. Grayson has concerns about unauthorized archaeological work on your property. Legal implications. Please call immediately. They're accelerating, Jacob noted, showing the others the message, probably trying to intimidate us before we can file for protection. Too late, Amara said with quiet satisfaction, turning her laptop toward them to show a confirmation screen. Emergency protection petition, submitted electronically at 6:24 this morning. They can bluster all they want, but legally, nothing can be removed or disturbed from that site until a formal review process is complete. The sound of vehicles on the gravel driveway interrupted their conversation. Jacob moved to the window and felt his stomach tighten. Not one but 3 black SUVs were approaching, along with what appeared to be a county sheriff's patrol car. That's not just Heritage, he said quietly. They've brought reinforcements. Sophia joined him at the window, her expression hardening as she recognized the lead vehicle, the State Archaeological Society's Field Research Unit. Grayson's moving aggressively, bringing in his institutional resources before we can fully secure the site. And the sheriff, Jacob added, recognizing Sheriff Calloway, a man known to be closely aligned with county business interests. They're trying to overwhelm us with official presence. Amara remained calm, quickly gathering their most critical documentation. This is actually good for us. Their heavy-handed approach demonstrates exactly why independent oversight is necessary. She handed Jacob a formal document. This is the emergency protection order, legally filed and binding. No one can disturb that site without federal clearance, regardless of who they've brought along for intimidation. Jacob squared his shoulders, the generations of Mercer stubbornness rising to the occasion. Let's meet them outside. Better to control the engagement than let them surround the house. The three stepped onto the farmhouse porch, just as the vehicles parked in a semicircle in the yard. Rusty took up position beside Jacob, his posture alert but not aggressive. From the lead vehicle emerged Dr. Grayson, Alicia Donovan, and a man Jacob didn't recognize, carrying what appeared to be sophisticated scanning equipment. Sheriff Calloway exited his patrol car separately, his demeanor suggesting he wasn't entirely comfortable with his role in this confrontation. "Mr. Mercer," Grayson called as he approached, his tone professionally cordial, though his eyes were cold. "I'm afraid we have a serious situation developing. Our preliminary scans indicate you've uncovered a site of significant historical importance and have allowed unauthorized excavation and documentation in violation of state historical preservation statutes." Alicia stepped forward, her corporate demeanor firmly in place. "Jacob, we're trying to protect both your interests and the historical significance of whatever you found. Dr. Grayson's team is properly certified for archaeological assessment, unlike—" Her gaze flicked dismissively toward Sophia. "Certain academic freelancers with questionable methodologies." Before Jacob could respond, Amara stepped forward, her professional confidence evident despite being significantly shorter than everyone present. "I'm Amara Patel, cultural heritage attorney. I believe you'll find this documentation relevant to your concerns." She handed copies of the emergency protection filing to both Grayson and Sheriff Calloway. "As of 6:24 this morning, this site is under federal emergency protection, pending comprehensive assessment by a multi-agency team. No single institution has authority to conduct independent excavation or removal." Grayson scanned the document, his expression darkening. "This is procedurally irregular. The State Archaeological Society has jurisdictional priority for initial assessment of all potentially significant sites within state boundaries. That priority is superseded when indigenous cultural heritage may be involved," Amara countered. "Smoothly. The multi-agency approach ensures all perspectives and interests are properly represented, including those of potentially affiliated tribal nations." Sheriff Calloway, clearly uncomfortable with the increasingly technical legal discussion, turned to Jacob. "Mr. Mercer, my only concern is ensuring proper procedures are followed. I'm not here to take sides, just to maintain order while these matters are sorted out." Jacob appreciated the sheriff's attempt at neutrality, which suggested he wasn't completely in Heritage's pocket. "I understand, Sheriff. We're committed to following proper legal procedures as well. That's why we've sought independent legal guidance to navigate these complex matters." Alicia, sensing the situation slipping from their control, adopted a more conciliatory tone. "Jacob, we're not adversaries here. Heritage recognizes the potential historical significance of your discovery and wants to ensure it's properly preserved. Our offer to purchase has been substantially increased to reflect this new value, and we're prepared to guarantee continued access for your family as part of any agreement." "That's very generous," Jacob replied carefully. "But I'm not making any decisions about ownership or access until the full significance of this discovery is properly established through independent assessment." Grayson, less adept at concealing his frustration, stepped closer. "Mr. Mercer, you're well outside your depth here. This discovery, whatever its nature, requires expert handling and institutional resources far beyond what you or Dr. Vasquez can provide. The Archaeological Society has been studying this region's archaeological significance for over a century." "That's precisely what concerns us," Sophia interjected, meeting Grayson's gaze directly. "Your institution's century-long interest in this specific property, dating back to Professor Whitfield's interactions with William Mercer in the 1940s, suggests a predetermined agenda rather than objective scientific inquiry." The reference to Whitfield visibly startled Grayson, his composure momentarily cracking. "You've been reading old journals and constructing conspiracy theories, Dr. Vasquez, hardly the basis for scientific or legal determinations." "On the contrary," Amara responded, "contemporaneous documentation of institutional pressure spanning multiple generations creates a compelling case for independent oversight rather than allowing the very organization implicated in that documentation to control assessment." The standoff continued for several more minutes, with Grayson alternating between professional courtesy and thinly veiled threats about regulatory consequences, while Alicia attempted to reframe the conversation around financial benefits. For his part, Sheriff Calloway remained largely silent, clearly recognizing that the legal complexities extended beyond his jurisdiction. Finally, recognizing that their initial intimidation strategy had failed, Grayson shifted tactics. "We'll review this emergency protection filing with our legal team. In the meantime, I trust you'll ensure no further unauthorized access to the site occurs." He handed Jacob his card, with a number handwritten on the back. "When you're ready to discuss this reasonably, without the adversarial legal posturing, call me directly. There are aspects to this discovery that may be far more significant and potentially hazardous than you realize." As the vehicles departed, Jacob, Sophia, and Amara exchanged glances, recognizing the veiled threat in Grayson's parting words. "What did he mean by hazardous?" Jacob asked, once they were alone again. Sophia shook her head. "It's a common tactic, suggesting some danger or contamination to justify emergency institutional intervention. But there's something else happening here. Grayson knows more about what's down there than he should, even accounting for whatever records the Archaeological Society might have maintained. And he's worried," Amara added, "that emergency filing caught them off guard. They expected to simply overwhelm you with institutional authority and take control of the site immediately." They returned to the kitchen to regroup, the confrontation having confirmed the need for both vigilance and accelerated documentation. As Sophia updated their digital records with notes about the morning's events, Jacob pulled out one of William's later journals, searching for any mention of similar institutional pressure tactics. What he found was disturbing. In entries from 1968, William described increasingly explicit threats from representatives of what he now clearly identified as the antiquarian circle. Threats that extended beyond financial pressure to suggestions of potential harm. March 8, 1968. One entry read, Caldwell's successor, a man named Thornton, visited today with two associates whose manner suggested enforcement rather than scholarship. Their interest in the eastern section has intensified following the unusual lights observed during last month's lunar eclipse. Thornton stated directly that certain knowledge is too significant to be left in untrained hands, and that the Circle would take necessary measures to secure access. The threat was thinly veiled, but unmistakable. Jacob showed the entry to Sophia and Amara, both of whom recognized the escalating pattern matching their current situation. "Your grandfather documented something significant during an astronomical event," Sophia noted. "Given what we've seen of the underground observatory chamber, that makes perfect sense. The site was designed specifically to observe particular celestial alignments, and this antiquarian circle has been pursuing that knowledge for generations," Amara added. "The question is why? What makes this site so valuable that an organization would maintain interest over more than 70 years? As if in answer to her question, Jacob's phone chimed with an email notification from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read simply, "Regarding the Mercer site, urgent." With Sophia and Amara looking over his shoulder, Jacob opened the message to find a brief text and an attached image. "Mr. Mercer, not all within the Archaeological Society share Dr. Grayson's agenda. The attached photograph from our restricted archives may help you understand what you're dealing with. Exercise extreme caution. The antiquarian circle's interest extends far beyond archaeology." The attached image showed a black and white photograph, dated 1956, depicting what appeared to be the main chamber they had explored, but with a crucial difference. The central altar, rather than being static as they had observed it, appeared to be emitting some kind of light or energy effect that the primitive camera had captured as a blurred glow. Standing around the altar were 5 men in formal attire, their expressions showing what could only be described as reverent awe. "That's impossible," Sophia whispered. "The photographic technology of that era couldn't have been manipulated to create this effect. Whatever they captured was actually happening." Jacob stared at the image, recognizing similarities to his grandfather's journal entry about unusual lights during an astronomical event. They gained access to the chamber at some point, but how? The entrance we discovered showed no signs of previous disturbance. "There must be another way in," Amara concluded. "One they discovered but subsequently lost access to, which would explain their persistent attempts to acquire the property legally." Sophia was already pulling up their ground-penetrating radar, scans on her laptop. "Look here," she said, indicating a section they hadn't fully explored. "This linear feature extending toward the county road could be another passageway, possibly an original entrance that became blocked or concealed over time." The anonymous email and historical photograph added urgent new dimensions to their understanding. Whatever lay beneath Oakridge Valley Farm wasn't just archaeologically significant. It apparently possessed some property or capability that had inspired century-long pursuit by a secretive organization willing to employ increasingly aggressive tactics. "We need to complete our documentation immediately," Sophia decided, "especially of the observatory chamber and any astronomical alignments it might track. If the antiquarian circle accessed the site during a specific celestial event and observed something significant, we need to understand what they were pursuing." Jacob checked the weather forecast on his phone. Clear skies for the next 3 days. If we're going to conduct additional exploration, now's the time, before they can mobilize legal countermeasures to our protection filing." As they prepared for another descent into the chambers, Jacob felt the weight of responsibility his grandfather had carried for decades. The burden of protecting something extraordinary from those who would exploit it for purposes unknown. But unlike William, who had maintained solitary vigilance, Jacob had found allies with the expertise and commitment to help him navigate these treacherous waters. Whatever secrets lay hidden beneath the eastern hillside of Oakridge Valley Farm, Jacob was determined they would be revealed and protected on terms that honored both his family's legacy and the remarkable civilization that had created them, not controlled by a shadowy organization that had waited generations to claim them. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredible discoveries that are rewriting history. Tomorrow, we'll reveal what Jacob and Dr. Vasquez found as they ventured deeper into the mysterious chambers and what happened when the antiquarian circle made their next move. Equipped with enhanced documentation tools and additional safety gear, Jacob, Sophia, and Amara descended into the underground complex for a more thorough exploration. The main chamber remained as they had left it, the artifacts untouched, but with their improved lighting system, new details emerged from the shadows. Intricate carvings along the upper walls depicting celestial bodies, mathematical symbols, etched into supporting columns, and subtle color variations in the stonework, suggesting specific minerals had been selected for their properties rather than convenience. The level of astronomical and mathematical knowledge displayed here is extraordinary, Sophia remarked, as she carefully photographed a sequence of symbols that appeared to represent planetary movements. These aren't just decorative patterns, they're sophisticated calculations, tracking celestial cycles over extremely long time periods. Amara, though not an archaeologist, contributed valuable perspective from her work with indigenous cultural heritage. The symbolism here shares elements with several Native American traditions, but combines them in ways I've never encountered in documented sites. It's as if we're looking at a completely unknown cultural tradition that somehow bridged multiple indigenous knowledge systems. Their primary focus was the observatory chamber, with its complex arrangement of reflection pools and precisely positioned apertures. Sophia had brought specialized mapping equipment to document the exact alignment of each opening relative to celestial coordinates. Based on these alignments, she explained after taking several measurements, this observatory was designed to track not just the standard solstices and equinoxes, but also specific star systems and what appears to be a recurring 19-year cycle in the relationship between lunar phases and specific constellations. "The Metonic cycle," Jacob said, surprising both women with his knowledge. At their questioning looks, he smiled sheepishly. Astronomy was a hobby in high school. It's the period after which the phases of the moon recur on the same days of the year. Sophia nodded, impressed by his insight. Exactly. And according to my calculations, a significant alignment visible from these precise coordinates will occur. She consulted her tablet. In approximately 2 weeks. The timing sent a chill through the group. William's journal had mentioned unusual lights during an astronomical event, and the mysterious photograph showed some kind of energy phenomenon during what may have been a similar alignment. "This can't be coincidence," Amara observed. Grayson's sudden urgency, The escalation from heritage. They know about the upcoming alignment and want control of the site before it occurs. They continued their exploration, following a passage that extended beyond the observatory chamber. After about 60 feet, it opened into a third chamber they hadn't previously discovered, smaller than the others, but even more puzzling in its contents. At the center stood what appeared to be a mechanism, not a simple artifact, but an integrated system of stone, metal, and crystal components arranged in concentric circles around a central pedestal. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, showing precision that seemed impossible for ancient tools to achieve. Most remarkable were the crystal elements, clear quartz-like structures cut with mathematical perfection into specific geometric forms. Sophia trailed off, at a loss for words, as she circled the mechanism. I have no archaeological context for something like this. The technological sophistication required to create these components goes beyond anything documented in pre-Columbian civilizations. Jacob approached carefully, noting how the central pedestal aligned perfectly with an aperture in the ceiling. Another connection to the sky above, but focused on a much smaller field of view than those in the observatory chamber. It's designed to channel something, he suggested, tracing the arrangement with his light. Light or energy focused through these crystals and directed around these circular tracks. Amara was documenting everything with her camera, her legal training giving way to simple human wonder. Whatever culture built this had knowledge we've lost or never discovered. This isn't primitive technology. It's just different technology than what our civilization developed. As they studied the mechanism chamber, Sophia's attention was drawn to inscriptions encircling the room at eye level, a continuous band of symbols more elaborate than those they'd seen elsewhere. This appears to be instructional, she said. After studying a section carefully, not just decorative or commemorative, but actual operational guidance for the mechanism if we could translate it. The implications of what they were documenting grew increasingly profound. They had discovered not just artifacts from an unknown civilization, but apparent technology based on principles unfamiliar to modern science. Technology specifically designed to interact with celestial alignments that occurred on predictable but rare cycles. After several hours of intensive documentation, they reluctantly prepared to return to the surface. As they gathered their equipment, Jacob noticed something they had overlooked: a small alcove partially hidden behind a projecting stone column. Inside was a single object, a handheld device resembling a sophisticated compass or astronomical instrument, crafted from the same materials as the larger mechanism. Should we take this for closer study? He asked, hesitant to remove anything from the site, but recognizing the potential value of examining one component in detail. Sophia considered carefully. Normally, I would insist everything remain in situ until a full scientific assessment is complete. But given the unusual circumstances and the likely attempts by Grayson to seize control of the site, she nodded slowly. Yes, one artifact for analysis might be justified, particularly if it helps us understand the larger mechanism's purpose. Jacob carefully wrapped the device in protective cloth and secured it in his pack. As they ascended to the surface, each was lost in their own thoughts about the extraordinary implications of what lay beneath Oakridge Valley Farm. Emerging into late afternoon sunlight, they were immediately aware that something had changed. A drone hovered at the legal minimum altitude over the property, obviously monitoring their activities. More concerning was the temporary roadblock they could see at the farm's entrance. Not official police barricades, but private security vehicles, strategically positioned to control access. "They're escalating again," Amara observed grimly, "probably trying to isolate us until they can find a legal workaround to our protection filing." "We should get our documentation secured immediately," Sophia suggested, transferring files from her equipment to encrypted drives and making copies housed in multiple locations. Jacob checked his phone to find several missed calls and messages from Alicia Reynolds from his bank, and most alarmingly, from the county tax assessor's office, announcing an emergency reassessment of his property value based on newly discovered mineral or archaeological assets. "They're attacking from multiple angles," he said, showing the others the tax notification. "Trying to force a financial crisis even if they can't directly access the site." Amara scanned the notice with a lawyer's precision. "This is legally questionable, but would take months to challenge effectively. They're counting on immediate financial pressure to force your cooperation." As they secured their equipment and documentation in Sophia's car, a new message appeared on Jacob's phone from the same anonymous email address that had sent the historical photograph. "Mercer, Grayson has convinced National Heritage Registry to conduct emergency assessment tomorrow morning. Claims imminent threat to irreplaceable cultural assets. Federal jurisdiction would supersede your protection filing. Circle members will accompany team as consultants. Whatever you discovered must be documented independently before they arrive." The message confirmed their fears. Grayson and his antiquarian circle were mobilizing institutional resources to overwhelm their legal protections. By the following morning, they could lose control of the site entirely. Back in the farmhouse, they held an urgent strategy session. Sophia connected remotely with archaeological colleagues from several universities, sharing selected documentation and securing commitments for independent verification of their findings. Amara activated her network of indigenous rights attorneys, creating additional layers of legal protection through tribal cultural heritage claims. Through these efforts, they established a distributed knowledge base that couldn't be easily suppressed or controlled. The discovery's existence and significance now documented by multiple independent experts across different institutions. As night fell, they turned their attention to the artifact Jacob had retrieved, the handheld device from the mechanism chamber. Under controlled lighting in the kitchen, Sophia carefully examined it, documenting every detail before attempting to understand its function. "The craftsmanship is extraordinary," she noted, studying the precision-cut crystal components and intricate metalwork. "These aren't cast metals, but appear to have been shaped through some kind of molecular manipulation technique we don't fully understand." The device featured concentric rotating rings around a central crystal, with markings that appeared to correspond to astronomical alignments. As Sophia carefully manipulated the components, Jacob noticed something unexpected. Faint traces of luminescence activating within the crystal, visible only in near darkness. "It's responding to movement," he observed, dimming the lights further, or perhaps to the specific alignment of the rings. Through careful experimentation, they discovered that certain configurations of the rotating elements caused the central crystal to emit a soft blue luminescence, not bright enough to illuminate, The room, but clearly an intentional effect rather than simple reflection. This is some form of energy activation, Sophia hypothesized, her scientific training struggling to contextualize the phenomenon. The crystal structure somehow responds to specific geometric alignments, but the power source is completely unclear. There's no battery, no fuel, no obvious energy input. As they continued experimenting with the device, their scientific curiosity was tempered by growing ethical questions. Were they equipped to responsibly handle technology they didn't understand, created by a civilization whose knowledge had been lost for centuries? Should such discoveries be shared widely, potentially transforming scientific understanding, but also creating unknown risks? "We're at a pivotal decision point," Amara observed, giving voice to what they were all feeling. "Beyond the immediate, legal battle, we need to determine the right course for this discovery in the longer term. Museums, academic research, indigenous cultural reclamation, private preservation. Each path has profound implications." The question hung in the air as they considered their options. Jacob felt the weight of his grandfather's legacy and his own responsibility as the accidental steward of this remarkable discovery. The financial pressures threatening his farm suddenly seemed small compared to the larger questions of historical and cultural significance. What would happen if Grayson and his antiquarian circle gained control? He asked, bringing the discussion back to their immediate challenge. Sophia's expression darkened. "Based on their century-long pursuit and the secrecy they've maintained, I doubt their intentions align with open scientific inquiry or cultural respect. The photograph we received suggests they've witnessed something extraordinary during previous access to the site, something they've kept hidden rather than shared with the scientific community. And they're desperate to regain access before the alignment in 2 weeks, Amara added. Whatever they experienced or expect to happen during that astronomical event, they want to control it completely." As midnight approached, they reached a difficult consensus. They would need to reveal enough about their discovery to secure broader protection while withholding specific details about the mechanism chamber and its apparent technological function. "Until proper scientific protocols can be established, we should focus on the archaeological and cultural significance," Sophia suggested. "The evidence of advanced mathematical knowledge, astronomical observation, and sophisticated construction techniques. That's enough to justify comprehensive protection without immediately introducing elements that might trigger either scientific skepticism or dangerous curiosity." Jacob agreed with this measured approach, though he felt increasingly certain that the full significance of what lay beneath his farm extended far beyond conventional archaeology. Whatever the ancient builders had created was designed to function during specific celestial alignments, to channel, focus, or perhaps even generate energy through means not yet understood by modern science. As they finalized their strategy for confronting the next day's challenges, Jacob found himself contemplating the broader implications of their discovery. Beyond the immediate battle with Grayson and Heritage, beyond even the scientific revolution the site might trigger, there were profound questions about humanity's past and future. What kind of civilization had created this technology? Why had knowledge of their achievements been lost? And perhaps most importantly, what wisdom might they have encoded in their creation that modern society needed to rediscover? The artifact in their possession, quietly glowing in the darkened kitchen, represented just a fragment of that ancient knowledge. a tantalizing glimpse into a technological tradition developed along entirely different principles than those that had shaped the modern world. Understanding it properly would require not just scientific analysis, but cultural and philosophical context that might take years or decades to reconstruct. As Jacob finally retired to his bedroom for a few hours of needed rest, he found himself reflecting on his grandfather's words about the site's significance. Not from greed, but from deep conviction that some discoveries belong not to individuals or institutions, but to humanity itself. The crisis threatening his family farm had unexpectedly transformed into something far larger, a battle not just for his personal legacy, but for control of knowledge that could transform understanding of human history and capability. Whatever the coming days might bring, Jacob was determined to honor both his family's stewardship and the remarkable civilization whose works they had uncovered, ensuring their discovery served the greater good rather than narrow institutional or corporate interests. Outside the farmhouse, unnoticed by its occupants, the device they had brought to the surface was affecting subtle changes in its environment. Compass needles in nearby equipment slowly shifted from true north. Electronic devices experienced minor power fluctuations, and for brief moments, the night sky above Oakridge Valley Farm displayed faint atmospheric phenomena invisible to casual observation, but detectable to the sophisticated monitoring equipment now surrounding the property. The ancient technology was awakening, responding to stimuli. It had been designed to detect centuries before modern civilization had developed, and as the celestial alignment approached, its effects would only grow stronger. Dawn broke over Oakridge Valley Farm with golden light that belied the tension of the coming confrontation. Jacob stood on his porch with a mug of coffee, watching the road for the inevitable arrival of Grayson's emergency assessment team. Rusty lay at his feet, the dog's usual playfulness replaced by a watchful alertness that mirrored his owner's mood. Inside, Sophia and Amara were making final preparations, organizing their documentation and legal materials for maximum impact. They had spent the pre-dawn hours implementing a sophisticated strategy, distributing key evidence to trusted colleagues across multiple institutions, establishing a secure online repository that would automatically release their findings if they didn't check in at regular intervals, and preparing concise briefing materials that highlighted the site's legitimate archaeological significance while downplaying its more inexplicable aspects. The first wave will be intimidation, Amara predicted as she organized her legal documents. Overwhelming institutional presence, vague references to regulatory authority, implied threats about the consequences of non-cooperation. Classic tactics when dealing with individuals who've discovered something valuable on their own property. Sophia nodded in agreement. Then they'll shift to incentives, offers of collaboration, recognition, financial compensation. When that fails, they'll escalate to some form of manufactured emergency that requires immediate institutional intervention. Jacob smiled grimly at their assessment. You've both done this before. More times than I care to remember, Amara confirmed. The patterns become predictable once you've seen them enough. Powerful interests rarely change their playbook when it's worked for generations. The artifact they had retrieved from the mechanism chamber sat on the kitchen table, its crystal components no longer glowing, but still radiating a subtle presence that had affected electronic equipment throughout the night. Sophia's scientific instruments had recorded unusual energy patterns emanating from the device, patterns that defied conventional explanation but corresponded to the alignment of celestial bodies currently visible in the morning sky. Whatever this technology is, Sophia had noted during their overnight analysis, it appears to respond to cosmic conditions rather than human intervention, like a receiver tuned to frequencies we don't fully comprehend. The sound of approaching vehicles drew them to the windows. The procession coming up the driveway was even more substantial than they had anticipated. Two large SUVs bearing National Heritage Registry markings, a van with federal government plates, Alicia Donovan's now familiar Horizon vehicle, and most concerning, an unmarked black truck with satellite communication equipment visible on its roof. "They've brought serious resources," Jacob observed, counting at least 10 people emerging from the vehicles, including some we haven't encountered before. Among the new arrivals was a tall, distinguished-looking man in his 60s who moved with military precision despite his civilian clothes. Even from a distance, his air of command was evident as others deferred to his directions. He surveyed the farmhouse and surrounding property with calculated assessment, his gaze lingering on the camouflaged entrance to the underground chambers. "That's not just another academic or corporate representative," Amara murmured. "That's someone with significant authority. The real face of the antiquarian circle," Sophia suggested. "Someone who normally remains in the background while Grayson handles the public interactions." They had little time to speculate further as the delegation approached the house. Jacob stepped onto the porch to meet them, projecting a calm confidence that belied his internal tension. Rusty remained at his side, watchful but restrained. "Mr. Mercer," Dr. Grayson called with forced cordiality. "We've brought the National Heritage Registry Assessment Team as discussed yesterday. Given the potential significance of your discovery, the registry has authorized emergency evaluation protocols under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act." The distinguished older man stepped forward, extending his hand. "Colonel James Archer, retired, now serving as Special Advisor to the Registry's Critical Heritage Division. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Mercer, despite the unusual circumstances." Jacob shook the offered hand, noting the firm grip and evaluating gaze. "I wasn't aware the Heritage Registry had a Critical Heritage Division, Colonel." A flicker of appreciation crossed Archer's face at Jacob's directness. "It's a specialized unit, activated only for discoveries of exceptional significance. Dr. Grayson's preliminary report suggested your property might qualify." Before Jacob could respond, Sophia and Amara emerged from the house, positioning themselves strategically on either side of him, a united front against the institutional delegation. "I believe introductions are in order," Amara stated professionally. "I'm Amara Patel, cultural heritage attorney representing Mr. Mercer's interests in this matter, and this is Dr. Sofia Vasquez, archaeological consultant, conducting preliminary scientific assessment of the site." Grayson's expression tightened at their formal presentation, but Colonel Archer seemed unsurprised, even expectant. "Ms. Patel, Dr. Vasquez, your reputations precede you. Perhaps we could continue this conversation inside, away from the morning heat." The request was reasonable, but represented the first tactical move, entering Jacob's personal space, establishing a more controlled environment for their discussion. After a moment's consideration, Jacob nodded his agreement, but countered, with his own condition. The kitchen table should accommodate us all. I'd prefer to keep this initial meeting centralized rather than having people wandering the property independently. Once seated around the kitchen table, the artifact carefully removed and secured in Sophia's vehicle beforehand, the true negotiations began. Colonel Archer took the lead, his approach more straightforward than Grayson's academic posturing. "Mr. Mercer, let's address the situation directly. You've discovered something significant beneath your property, something with profound historical implications. Our responsibility is to ensure proper preservation and scientific evaluation of such discoveries, particularly when they may contribute to understanding of pre-colonial civilizations." "A responsibility we fully support," Amara interjected, "smoothly, which is why we've already implemented comprehensive documentation protocols and filed for appropriate protective designations under both federal and tribal heritage statutes." Archer nodded, acknowledging their preparedness. "Commendable initiative. However, the nature of this particular discovery may exceed standard archaeological parameters, necessitating specialized expertise and security measures beyond conventional preservation frameworks." Sophia leaned forward slightly. "What exactly do you mean by exceeding standard archaeological parameters, Colonel? Our preliminary assessment indicates an advanced pre-Columbian site with exceptional architectural and astronomical features, but nothing that would fall outside established archaeological evaluation methodologies." It was a calculated challenge, forcing Archer to either reveal more about what the antiquarian circle knew or accept their characterization of the discovery as merely an exceptional but conventional archaeological site. The colonel studied Sophia for a moment before responding. "Dr. Vasquez, both your reputation and the evidence visible in your preliminary documentation suggest you've observed anomalous features inconsistent with conventional understanding of pre-Columbian technological capabilities, features similar to those documented in certain other sites of interest to our division." This unexpected acknowledgement of other sites caught them by surprise. The implication that the chambers beneath Oakridge Valley Farm weren't unique, that similar discoveries had been made and apparently classified, shifted the conversational dynamics significantly. Jacob decided to test the boundaries of this new openness. Like the site accessed by members of the Antiquarian Circle in 1956, the one where unusual energy phenomena were photographed during a celestial alignment. The reaction around the table was immediate. Grayson's face paled visibly, Alicia Reynolds looked confused, and several of the presumed federal representatives exchanged concerned glances. Only Colonel Archer maintained his composure, though. His eyes narrowed slightly in reassessment. "You've been conducting historical research beyond the physical exploration," he observed. "Impressive resourcefulness, Mr. Mercer. Yes, there are documented precedents for certain phenomena associated with sites of this particular construction style, which is precisely why specialized oversight is appropriate." The acknowledgement represented a significant shift from denial to limited disclosure, a tactical adjustment suggesting Archer was authorized to reveal more than Grayson had been. Jacob exchanged quick glances with Sophia and Amara, all recognizing the opportunity to push for additional information. "Colonel," Jacob said carefully, "my family has been stewards of this land for over 70 years, often under pressure from interests seeking access to what my grandfather discovered beneath it. He met Archer's gaze directly. Before we discuss any form of institutional involvement, we need to understand exactly what you know about the site's true nature and significance. Archer considered this request, his military background evident in his methodical evaluation of options before responding. Fair enough, but such a discussion would necessarily include information classified under national security protocols. I'm prepared to provide that context, but only under appropriate confidentiality agreements. Amara immediately countered. Any agreements would need to preserve our client's rights to maintain independent documentation and assessment with clearly defined parameters around what specifically constitutes sensitive information versus general archaeological findings. For the next hour, a careful negotiation unfolded around the kitchen table, not the intimidation tactics they had anticipated, but a genuine, if cautious, exchange between parties with different priorities, but potentially aligned interests. Colonel Archer revealed himself to be neither the academic zealot that Grayson embodied, nor the corporate opportunist represented by Alicia Donovan, but something more complex. A government official genuinely concerned with both scientific understanding and security implications. As the technical details of a potential collaborative assessment were hammered out by Amara and the federal legal representative, Colonel Archer requested a private word with Jacob. They stepped onto the porch, the morning sun now high overhead. "Mr. Mercer, I want to be direct with you. Outside the formal negotiations," Archer said, his tone dropping to ensure privacy. "What you've discovered is one of 5 known sites with similar characteristics identified across North and Central America. The technology these sites contain appears to operate on principles not fully understood by modern science, with capabilities that activate during specific astronomical alignments." Jacob maintained a neutral expression despite his surprise at this candor. "Like the alignment occurring in 2 weeks?" Archer nodded. "Precisely. During previous alignments, observed effects have included localized electromagnetic anomalies, gravimetric fluctuations, and in one documented case, a temporary aperture phenomenon with characteristics suggesting non-local connectivity." "Non-local connectivity," Jacob repeated carefully. "You mean a portal of some kind?" That would be an oversimplification, but not entirely inaccurate. Archer gazed across the farm's fields, his expression thoughtful. "Mr. Mercer, the organization you know as the Antiquarian Circle began as a legitimate scientific body in the 1930s, dedicated to documenting anomalous archaeological discoveries that challenged conventional historical narratives. Over time, it evolved into something more problematic. A quasi-religious order convinced these sites represented contact points with advanced intelligences." Jacob processed this revelation, connecting it with passages from his grandfather's journals. And now? Now it exists as a shadow of its former self. A few dedicated zealots, like Grayson, operating within legitimate institutions, but pursuing an agenda inconsistent with objective scientific investigation. My division was established precisely to prevent such groups from controlling access to these sites, while also ensuring their study proceeds under appropriate protocols. The sincerity in Archer's manner was compelling, but Jacob remained cautious. "Why should I trust your division more than the Archaeological Society or Heritage?" "You shouldn't. Not without verification," Archer replied frankly, which is why I'm proposing a genuinely collaborative approach. Your team maintains independent documentation and oversight. Our resources provide security and specialized analysis capabilities, shared access under mutual monitoring. It was a far cry from the institutional takeover they had feared, a recognition of their legitimate role as stakeholders rather than obstacles to be removed. As they rejoined the others inside, Jacob could see that similar progress had been made in the technical discussions, with Amara looking cautiously satisfied rather than defensively vigilant. "We've outlined a preliminary framework for collaborative assessment," she informed him. "Independent teams with complementary expertise, transparent information sharing with clearly defined security protocols, and most importantly, no removal of artifacts or alteration of the site without unanimous agreement from all participating entities." They've also agreed to include indigenous representatives from several tribal nations with potential historical connection to the site, Sophia added, a significant concession that aligns with best practices in cultural heritage management. The atmosphere around the kitchen table had transformed from confrontational to cautiously collaborative, though Jacob noted that Grayson remained visibly displeased with this resolution, and Alicia Donovan appeared to be re-evaluating Heritage's position in light of the federal involvement. As the meeting concluded and the various representatives prepared to depart, Colonel Archer had one final question for Jacob. "There's the matter of any artifacts you may have already removed from the site for preliminary study. Our agreement would ideally include full disclosure of all materials previously extracted." Jacob met his gaze steadily. "Once the formal collaboration agreement is signed and verified by our legal counsel, we'll provide complete documentation of everything we've discovered, including any items temporarily removed for analysis." Archer accepted this conditional commitment with a nod of understanding. "I look forward to working with you and your team, Mr. Mercer. What lies beneath your farm may change our understanding not just of human history, but of technological possibilities we've only begun to comprehend." As the procession of vehicles departed down the driveway, Jacob, Sophia, and Amara gathered on the porch to assess this unexpected turn of events. "That wasn't the confrontation we prepared for," Sophia observed, watching the dust settle on the gravel road. "No," Amara agreed. "Archer represents a different approach entirely, professional, pragmatic, and apparently authorized to pursue collaborative rather than adversarial resolution." Jacob considered the morning's developments thoughtfully. The question is whether this collaboration is genuine or simply a more sophisticated strategy to gain control of the site. Archer revealed more than I expected about other similar discoveries and the historical context of the antiquarian circle. Too much for it to be a simple tactical deception. That level of disclosure creates vulnerability they wouldn't risk, unless they're genuinely seeking cooperation, Sophia suggested. As they continued discussing the implications, Jacob's phone chimed with a message from the anonymous source who had previously provided the historical photograph. "Archer can be trusted conditionally. Division established 1994 after Arizona incident. Grayson not informed of full protocols. Proceed with verification, but potential for legitimate collaboration exists. Additional documentation available if needed." The message reinforced their cautious optimism, while confirming their instinct to maintain independent verification of all claims. Whatever lay ahead, Formal collaboration, continued legal maneuvering, or preparation for the approaching celestial alignment, they had successfully navigated the initial institutional confrontation with their autonomy intact. Jacob looked out over his family's farm, the land that had sustained generations of Mercers and concealed an extraordinary secret beneath its seemingly ordinary surface. The financial threat of foreclosure now seemed remote, given the site's acknowledged significance, but larger questions loomed about his responsibility as the steward of a discovery with implications extending far beyond agriculture or archaeology. "So we proceed with the collaboration?" he asked his allies, seeking their counsel before committing to this new path. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "With appropriate safeguards and independent verification at every stage. The resources they can provide, especially as the alignment approaches, could be crucial for understanding the site's full significance. And we maintain our distributed documentation and legal protections," Amara added. "Trust, but verify, with multiple layers of accountability." As they began planning for this new collaborative phase, the artifact secured in Sophia's vehicle emitted a brief, intense pulse of energy, undetected by human senses, but registering on instruments monitoring. The property from both Colonel Archer's departing vehicles and others, positioned more discreetly along the county boundaries. The ancient technology was continuing its gradual reactivation, responding to cosmic conditions as they incrementally aligned toward the approaching conjunction. Whatever purpose its creators had designed it to fulfill, that purpose would soon be fully expressed for the first time in centuries, witnessed by a unique collaboration between a farmer fighting to save his legacy, scientists seeking understanding, and institutions pursuing knowledge they couldn't fully control. 2 weeks after Jacob Mercer's tractor had broken through the earth into an ancient mystery, Oakridge Valley Farm had transformed into something between a scientific research station and a secured historical site. The collaborative agreement had proven genuine, with Colonel Archer's division providing resources and expertise while honoring Jacob, Sophia, and Amara's continued oversight role. The night of the celestial alignment had arrived. The precise astronomical configuration, the underground observatory, had been designed to track centuries ago. Representatives from multiple agencies, academic institutions, and 3 indigenous nations gathered in carefully positioned observation posts, monitoring both the sky above and the ancient mechanism below. Jacob stood at the edge of the mechanism chamber, watching as the first light from the aligned stars penetrated the precisely engineered apertures in the ceiling. Sophia worked alongside specialists from Archer's division, calibrating instruments designed to measure phenomena beyond conventional parameters. Amara maintained position in the control center established in Jacob's barn, ensuring adherence to the protocols they had jointly established. As the alignment reached its peak, the mechanism in the chamber began to activate. Not through human intervention, but in response to the cosmic conditions it had been designed to detect. The crystal components glowed with increasing intensity, creating patterns of light that corresponded to the mathematical symbols etched into the surrounding walls. "Energy readings are exceeding all predicted parameters," called one of Archer's scientists, her voice betraying both excitement and concern. "The crystalline structure is generating some kind of coherent field that's expanding throughout the chamber." The artifact they had removed to the surface now returned to its position within the mechanism, served as a key component, channeling energy through precisely aligned geometric pathways. The entire underground complex had begun to function as a unified system, its purpose finally revealed after centuries of dormancy. What they witnessed that night defied conventional scientific explanation. The mechanism didn't create a physical portal, as some had feared or hoped, but instead generated what Sophia would later describe as an information aperture, a means of accessing knowledge encoded into the structure of reality itself, accessible only under specific cosmic conditions. Symbols and mathematical equations manifested within the energy field, representing information about celestial mechanics, atomic structures, and principles of energy manipulation beyond current scientific understanding. It wasn't communication from another intelligence, but rather a method of accessing universal principles that the site's ancient builders had discovered and preserved. It's a library, Jacob realized, watching as the patterns shifted and evolved. They built this entire complex not as a temple or technological device, but as a method of preserving and accessing knowledge that would otherwise be lost. For 6 hours, as the alignment peaked and gradually subsided, the mechanism continued generating increasingly complex information fields. Teams of scientists recorded everything, though much exceeded their capacity to comprehend immediately. Indigenous knowledge keepers recognized elements connecting to their most ancient oral traditions about star knowledge and universal patterns. By dawn, as the mechanism's activity gradually subsided, those present shared a profound sense of having witnessed something that would transform human understanding. This wasn't alien technology or supernatural phenomenon, but evidence of an advanced human civilization that had developed along different technological paths than modern society. One that had encoded its most profound discoveries into structures designed to preserve them through millennia. In the weeks that followed, preliminary analysis of the recorded data began generating revolutionary insights into physics, mathematics, and astronomy. The knowledge preserved by the ancient builders proved both confirmatory of cutting-edge theoretical work and suggestive of entirely new directions for scientific inquiry. For Jacob Mercer, the discovery's impact was deeply personal as well as historical. The collaboration agreement included provisions for preserving both his family's ownership of the farm and their special relationship to the site. Oakridge Valley Farm would continue as a working agricultural operation, while also hosting a research center dedicated to studying the knowledge uncovered beneath its fields. "Your grandfather would be proud," Sophia told him 6 months later as they stood watching the newly established research facility taking shape at the edge of the property. "He protected this discovery through instinct and determination. You've ensured it will benefit humanity rather than being controlled by narrow interests." The antiquarian circle's influence had been permanently disrupted, with Grayson removed from his position after investigation revealed decades of manipulated records and misappropriated resources. Colonel Archer's division had been reformed with increased transparency and civilian oversight, officially acknowledging the existence of other similar sites and establishing protocols for their collaborative study. Most significantly, the indigenous nations historically connected to the region had been granted formal recognition as cultural stakeholders, their traditional knowledge newly valued as potential keys to understanding the mathematical and astronomical systems preserved in the underground complex. 1 year after his tractor had broken through the earth, Jacob stood in his wheat field, the crop thriving under innovative farming methods inspired by agricultural principles encoded in the site's knowledge repository. The financial threat, too. His family legacy had been replaced by sustainable prosperity and profound purpose. "Sometimes I wonder if I was meant to find it," he commented to Sophia, who had become more than a scientific ally in the months since their discovery. "If all those generations of Mercers were just caretakers, maintaining the land until the right moment. Or perhaps the land chose your family," she suggested, her scientific mind having expanded to embrace perspectives previously beyond her. Consideration. People who would respect rather than exploit what lay beneath, who would recognize responsibility beyond ownership. As evening approached, they walked together toward the farmhouse, passing research teams headed to the underground complex for the night's observations. The ancient mechanism continued revealing new information during specific astronomical alignments, each event expanding human understanding of principles the site's builders had encoded millennia ago. The discovery beneath Oakridge Valley Farm hadn't just changed Jacob's life or advanced scientific knowledge, it had catalyzed a fundamental shift in how humanity viewed its own past and potential future. The civilization that had created the underground complex represented not aliens or supernatural beings, but human ancestors who had developed profound insights through different pathways than modern technological society had followed. Their legacy, preserved through an extraordinary feat of engineering and astronomical precision, offered contemporary humanity not just knowledge but wisdom. The recognition that technological advancement without corresponding ethical and philosophical development led only to fragmentation rather than true understanding. As stars appeared in the darkening sky above the farm that had been his family's legacy for generations, Jacob reflected on how a moment of crisis, his desperate attempt to clear new land before losing everything, had revealed something of immeasurable value, not just to him, but to all humanity. The ancient builders had created a bridge across time, preserving knowledge they deemed too valuable to lose. Jacob Mercer, through an accident of circumstance and the courage to protect what he didn't fully understand, had become the unlikely link between that ancient wisdom and a world now ready to receive it. When Rusty nudged his hand, Jacob realized they had been standing in silent contemplation for several minutes. Sophia's hand had found its way into his, their fingers intertwined, as naturally as their lives had become in the aftermath of discovery. "The most remarkable thing," he said, breaking the comfortable silence, "isn't what we found, but what it tells us about who we were and who we might become." Sophia nodded, her eyes on the first evening star. They weren't just technologically advanced. They understood integration, how knowledge connects across disciplines, how humanity connects with the cosmos, how past connects with future. She turned to him. "That's why they built a knowledge repository that would only activate when the stars were right and the right people were present. They weren't just preserving information. They were waiting for us to be ready." The implications had transformed more than archaeology or physics. Over the past year, they had witnessed philosophers, ethicists, and spiritual leaders engaging with the ancient knowledge alongside scientists and technologists, a holistic approach to discovery that honored the integrated vision of the original builders. 3 groups had been particularly transformed by the discovery: indigenous communities worldwide gained renewed recognition for knowledge systems previously dismissed by conventional science, validation that their ancestors had possessed sophisticated understanding of reality that modern civilization was only beginning to rediscover. The scientific community had been forced to confront the limitations of its compartmentalized approach to knowledge, as the ancient library revealed principles that crossed disciplinary boundaries in ways contemporary expertise struggled to comprehend. And perhaps most profoundly, ordinary people everywhere found inspiration in the revelation that human potential had been expressed in unexpected ways throughout history, ways that might still be recovered and renewed. As Jacob and Sophia walked back to the farmhouse, lights from the research facility behind them and stars overhead, Jacob thought about the financial crisis that had started it all. The foreclosure notice that had pushed him to desperate measures now seemed like the universe's way of ensuring the discovery happened at precisely the right moment, when technology was advanced enough to document the mechanism's activation. But society was mature enough to approach its wisdom with appropriate humility. The following morning, Jacob hosted a group of local farmers who had come to learn about sustainable agricultural methods derived from the site's knowledge. The ancient builders had understood principles of soil regeneration and ecological balance that modern agriculture was rediscovering through trial and error. By implementing these approaches, farms throughout the region were becoming more productive while reducing dependence on chemical inputs, a practical application of ancient wisdom solving contemporary challenges. The difference, Jacob explained to his neighbors gathered in the barn, isn't just technical, it's about relationship. The ancients saw farming as a partnership with natural systems rather than an imposition of will upon them. When we shift our perspective to that partnership model, solutions emerge that benefit both the land and those who depend on it. Several farmers nodded in recognition. This wasn't entirely new philosophy to people who worked the land, but the ancient knowledge provided systematic approaches that enhanced what many already intuitively understood. After the farmers departed, Colonel Archer arrived for his monthly coordination meeting. The relationship that had begun in cautious negotiation had evolved into genuine respect and friendship. Archer, freed from institutional constraints by the reforms in his division, had become an effective bridge between government resources and independent research. The President's science advisors are requesting another briefing, he informed Jacob and Sophia as they walked the property. The energy principles documented during the last alignment have significant implications for clean power generation. 3 university teams have already demonstrated prototype systems based on the crystal resonance patterns. Jacob nodded, unsurprised. The practical applications of the ancient knowledge were emerging across multiple fields: medicine, engineering, agriculture, and energy. Each innovation shared a common characteristic: technologies that worked with natural systems rather than against them, channeling existing energies rather than forcing artificial processes. Are we balancing advancement with wisdom? Jacob asked, voicing the concern that had become central to their stewardship. The ancients integrated technological capability with ethical frameworks and philosophical understanding. They encoded warnings alongside innovations. Archer understood immediately. That's precisely why we've maintained the Indigenous Council's oversight role and expanded the Ethics Committee. The technical knowledge without the accompanying wisdom would be like giving a child a powerful tool without teaching them responsibility. The institutional reforms Archer referenced represented perhaps the most surprising outcome of the discovery, a fundamental reconsideration of how knowledge was gathered, verified, and applied. The ancient library had revealed both technological principles and ethical frameworks for their application, encoded side by side in the crystalline mechanisms. Modern institutions were adapting to this integrated approach, breaking down barriers between disciplines and incorporating diverse perspectives that would have been dismissed a generation earlier. That evening, a thunderstorm approached the farm, bringing welcome rain after a dry spell. Jacob sat on the porch with Amara, who had arrived to finalize arrangements for the upcoming international conference on indigenous knowledge systems and their contemporary applications. The Tribal Elders Council has confirmed their participation, she reported, as lightning illuminated the distant clouds. They're bringing archival materials that may connect with the astronomical cycles documented in the observatory chamber, oral traditions that track star patterns over thousands of years. Jacob watched the advancing storm, thinking about how the ancient builders had encoded their understanding of natural cycles, weather, celestial movements, geological processes into their knowledge repository. Have you noticed how much of what we're rediscovering involves patience, long-term thinking across generations, rather than immediate results? Amara nodded thoughtfully. That's what struck me about the mechanism's design. They built something meant to operate across millennia, preserving knowledge until the right alignment, both astronomical and human, occurred. That kind of time frame is alien to our quarterly results culture, but natural to indigenous ways of knowing. The storm arrived, rain drumming on the farmhouse roof as it had for generations. Jacob thought about the chain of stewardship that had preserved this land and what lay beneath it, his grandfather recognizing something significant and protecting it without fully understanding what it was, his father maintaining the farm through difficult years, and now Jacob himself, accidental catalyst for a revelation that was changing the world. As the storm passed and stars began to reappear in the clearing sky, Jacob made his way to the underground complex, where Sophia was coordinating the night's research activities. The chambers that had once been mysterious and forbidding now felt familiar, almost like sacred spaces where ancient wisdom and contemporary inquiry converged. Sophia looked up from her work, her face illuminated by both modern screens and the subtle glow of the ancient crystals that never fully deactivated. After the initial alignment, perfect timing. We're about to test the new translation algorithm on the instructional sequences in the second chamber. Jacob joined her team as they implemented software designed to interpret the complex symbolism encoded in the chamber walls, a collaborative effort between linguists, mathematicians, and indigenous knowledge keepers that had yielded remarkable progress in understanding the ancients' communication system. As the algorithm processed the patterns, new meanings emerged on their screens. Detailed instructions for harmonizing human activities with natural cycles, methodologies for sustainable resource management, and philosophical frameworks for balanced development that honored both progress and preservation. They weren't just advanced technologically, one of the indigenous elders commented, studying the translations. They achieved what we're still struggling toward, integration of knowledge with wisdom, capability with responsibility, innovation with reverence. Later that night, As most researchers departed for rest, Jacob and Sophia remained in the mechanism chamber, contemplating the central installation that had transformed their understanding of human potential. In the year since its activation, the mechanism had revealed only a fraction of the knowledge it contained, each astronomical alignment unlocking new layers of information, as if the ancient builders had designed a curriculum unfolding over time. They understood that not all knowledge should be accessed at once, Sophia observed. Some insights require preparation, a foundation of understanding before more advanced concepts can be properly comprehended and responsibly applied. Jacob nodded, thinking about the parallels to his own journey from desperate farmer to steward of ancient wisdom. Like good teachers, they created a learning path, not just a data dump. As they prepared to leave, Jacob paused at the chamber entrance, looking back at the mechanism that had changed everything. My grandfather wrote that some discoveries belong not to individuals or institutions, but to humanity itself. I think he was only partly right. This knowledge belongs to humanity, but also to the earth and to the future, a trust we're responsible for rather than a resource we own. Emerging into the night air, they found the storm had completely passed, leaving the sky brilliantly clear. Above them, the same stars that had guided the ancient builders shone down on the world, being transformed by their legacy. The following morning, Jacob received news that the county had officially recognized Oakridge Valley Farm as both a working agricultural enterprise and a site of exceptional cultural heritage, providing permanent protection against development and ensuring that future generations of Mercers could continue their stewardship role if they chose. "Your family's legacy is secure," Amara told him, "both the farming tradition and your role as guardians of what lies beneath." For Jacob, who had begun this journey facing the loss of everything he valued, the resolution brought both gratitude and a profound sense of purpose. The farm that had sustained his family for generations now served as the connection point between ancient wisdom and future possibility, a bridge across time that had nearly been lost to foreclosure and corporate acquisition. As he walked his fields that afternoon, Jacob reflected on the chain of events that had led to this moment, the financial crisis that forced him to attempt cultivating the eastern hillside, the chance breakthrough into chambers hidden for centuries, his grandfather's journals that provided crucial context, and the allies who had helped him protect the discovery from those who would exploit it. Each link in that chain had seemed like chance at the time, but now appeared more like a pattern unfolding, what some of the indigenous elders called right timing, the convergence of circumstances that allows breakthrough to occur when both need and readiness align. In the year since the discovery, Jacob had learned that true wealth wasn't measured in acres or bank balances, but in contribution, the opportunity to serve as a connection point between wisdom preserved and possibilities emerging. The ancient builders had understood this principle, creating their knowledge repository not for personal gain, but as a gift to future generations they would never meet. That evening, as the research teams prepared for another night of exploration and documentation, Jacob climbed to the farmhouse attic and opened his grandfather's footlocker one more time. Among the journals and surveying tools lay an envelope he hadn't noticed before, addressed simply, "For when the time comes." Inside was a single page written in William's careful hand just weeks before his death. "To my grandson, who I trust will one day understand what I could only intuit." What lies beneath our land is more than a curiosity or artifact. It is a reminder that human potential follows many paths, some forgotten but none truly lost. I protected what I didn't fully understand because I recognized it as something precious, something that transcended ownership and demanded stewardship. I believe you were born to complete what I could only begin, not merely preserving this legacy, but helping it fulfill its purpose. The ancient ones built their repository, not just to store knowledge, but to share it when the world was ready to receive it with both capability and wisdom. Remember always that discovery is not possession. What you uncover belongs to humanity's story, past, present, and future intertwined. Your role is not to own, but to connect, not to control, but to facilitate. With pride in the man you are becoming, and faith in the guardian you will be, your grandfather, William Jacob, sat with the letter for a long time, moved by the connection across time, both to his grandfather and through him to the ancient builders who had created their legacy with similar intention. Later, joining Sophia at the research center as another evening of exploration began, Jacob shared the letter and his reflections on the parallel between William's stewardship and their current responsibility. Your grandfather understood something profound about discovery, Sophia noted. It's not an ending, but a beginning, not possession of answers, but acceptance of new questions. Together, they watched as teams of scientists, indigenous knowledge keepers, philosophers and technologists continued the process of learning from the ancient wisdom, each bringing different perspectives yet united in recognition that what had been uncovered beneath this ordinary farm represented not just information, but invitation, a call to integration that modern society desperately needed. As darkness fell completely and stars emerged overhead, Jacob thought about the journey that had brought him here, from the brink of losing his family's legacy to becoming part of a much larger story spanning centuries. The crisis that had seemed like an ending had proven instead to be a doorway to beginning, an invitation to participate in something far greater than he could have imagined. The ancient builders had created their knowledge repository as an act of profound optimism, a belief that future generations would eventually develop both the technological capability to access their wisdom and the ethical maturity to apply it responsibly. That optimism now flowed forward through time, inspiring contemporary society to recognize that advancement without wisdom was not progress at all. Across the property, lights glowed from the research facility, where teams continued exploring the ancient knowledge. From the observatory chamber, where astronomical alignments were being mapped across centuries, and from the farmhouse that had sheltered generations of Mercers as they maintained their quiet stewardship of the land. Jacob Mercer, farmer, guardian, bridge across time, stood at the meeting point of past and future, ordinary and extraordinary, personal legacy and universal heritage. The path that had begun with a desperate attempt to save his family farm had led to something none could have predicted: the recovery of ancient wisdom, precisely when the modern world needed it most. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.